Thank you for joining us on this episode of Pasture to Pets. I'm Jennifer Dowd, Inside Sales and Marketing Representative for Protrition, and I have with me today Todd Steen, nutritionist for Protrition Feed, and his dog Clyde, and then my little pup Cinch. And we're going to talk about nutrition, basic proper care of dogs of all sorts, and he has been gracious enough to allow us on their farm out here in Cumberland Furnace, Tennessee. So we're going to go back to the field and talk about some dogs. So Todd, thank you for having us on your beautiful property out here in Cumberland Furnace, Tennessee with your amazing dog Clyde, which is not joining us in the video right now. But if you don't mind to go over a little bit of nutrition facts about dogs in general, and then we'll go more in depth on indoor versus outdoor nutrition.
Sure thing. Of course, there are a couple of things that you'd want to start with, and that would be the life cycle of the animal. Is this a puppy, a growing dog, a working dog, a sedentary dog, an older dog, obese, thin? What is our animal, our target animal, and then subsequently what do we need to do with them? So we could start with the puppy, which generally speaking is going to have a very high nutrient requirement. Puppies in and of themselves will have less of a feed intake, obviously, than the bigger animals. So we'll want to concentrate the feed for its needs. So from a protein perspective, everybody always wants to start with protein. Protein perspective, we would want to have at least a 28, perhaps even as much as a 30% crude protein for a dry feed. Probably want to have closer to a 20% fat, something along those lines. Energy really is the big thing. We always talk about energy being big because it's required in a greater quantity than what protein is. All of them are important. Fiber is important. It's all important. But for the young puppy, we want to keep the puppy eating, and the more times, the more meals during the day for the young animal, the better off you are. As that animal grows and gains weight, their feed intake starts to grow. So some of the overall requirements lessen a little bit because they're compensated with the amount of feed intake that they would have. And then as you get into the more of a mature animal, basis of what type of genetics that they are. Small dog, medium dog, large breed dog, those kinds of things like that. We'll want to maintain a good body condition on them. We don't want them overweight. We don't want them underweight or any of those things. So we want to try to make a really nice condition for them. As the animal grows and matures, we want to look and make sure that we get the large breed versus the medium breeds versus the small breeds, because there are going to be some different issues that we want to look out for. Some breeds, some of the larger breeds, obviously have maybe a little bit more potential for hip dysplasia and some joints issues and things like that, particularly on some of the bigger breeds versus some of the smaller ones. So there may be a few characteristics in what we feed them that, to try to help that out. Protein wise, we'll start there again. Through the older animal, those requirements go down depending on the amount of work or the exercise that the animal is having. You can have from a 24% crude protein all the way down to an 18, and then as they get mature and get older, you could even have as low as a 12% from a maintenance perspective. So those are the easy nutrients to get in there. It's the energy gets to be the bigger part, and generally speaking, we look at it from a fat perspective. How much fat is in and the more the animal is exerting itself, the more exercise, the more work that the animal's doing, then we probably would like to have a little bit higher fat content.
So, in a younger dog, what is that cutoff age for puppy into maturity?
Yeah, basis of the what I would call its anatomy or the physiology of the young animal, that growth goes pretty quick. It's always been said that you'd like to go for a year. Some people don't. Will suggest 6 to 8 months, those kinds of things, or those time frames like that. Here's the way that I would look at that. I would think of it as depending on what genetics that I'm looking at here and how that animal is growing. A real rapid growing puppy will get to the point to where they start eating at a good clip, and so those real stringent requirements start lessening really quick. So I would look at it on the basis of what the animal is, how fast that they are growing on that, and there are feeds that what I would consider a more of an all inclusive that you could have as maybe a puppy feed slash high digestion growing type of a feed, and there are some of them that are out there. To answer your question, I would think that by 6 months, depending on the majority of it, but of the breeds or how they're growing, I would think by 6 months you could start transitioning to more of a what I would call a grower type of a product. A lot of people will ask what type: dry, wet, homemade. Do get questions about a lot of people wanting to feed their dogs a homemade type of a ration. And the only thing I would say about that, there's probably nothing wrong with any of it as long as it's balanced good enough. But remember, a lot of these companies that are manufacturing these, they spend a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of dollars into sorting out what is good and what is not good. And I think I would probably lean more towards feeding a feed like that than basically doing the home. Now, if it's a special needs, an animal that has some type of a special need, then maybe that there's a reason or a logic to do that. But for the most part, I would like to have it completely balanced.
Y'all see Singe is doing this for the video. So I don't know if you talked about water intake, but what is a normal water intake for dogs? I know with the heat and everything, as we're sitting out here right now, it's about 80 degrees. So what is a normal water intake?
First things first, water is the most important nutrient because you have to stay hydrated. Right. Particularly depending on the work level or the exercise that the animal is doing. The thing that's always been talked about, it's always been an ounce per pound of body weight. It's kind of been the whole thing. But I think I would look at it really from if the animal is working, the humidity is up. How is the animal going to be able to cool itself? Is there any shade? Things like that. Water is going to play a big role in it. Another thing to consider as well, dry feed versus a wet feed, because the wetter feeds obviously will have a little bit of moisture content, and subsequent water intake could be a little bit less, with those types of diets or with that type of a ration. But it's always been looked at as an ounce per pound of body weight.
And you said a working dog, so now we're going to dive into indoor versus outdoor working dog versus just a usual pet. What are some nutrients or nutrition that may differ between the two?
Well, obviously, energy is going to be the big thing. The more energy dense the ration or the feed is, with less of an exertion or less work, the body is really good about saving and storing that energy for another day, and that basically is fat. And then subsequently, you get into what I would call more of a heavier, obese, overweight animal, which brings on a lot of health issues from that perspective. So you don't really want to do it. So you want to match what the work effort or the workload is going to be, and you can do one of two things here. You can have a lower nutrient, more of a maintenance type dog feed, or you can limit feed it a little bit if you had a more denser. But remember now, the animal is going to want to eat to its quote unquote ad libitum dry matter intake.
Mhm.
And if we start limit feeding too much, then that can cause other problems as well. And not only from a nutritional perspective, but also from a behavior perspective. So we'll want to be careful about that. But if you lowered its caloric intake, then the animal should be okay. Long as we don't just cut them, significantly. So the more of the maintenance feeds, are going to be the more important.
Yeah. Now, going into proper care of these animals. So, we talked about nutrition, so that's a main part. But what are some other things that maybe dog owners or future dog owners would want to look at and make sure that they have all their bases covered before they get into owning a dog, or maybe take care of those things now when they have a dog?
Well, of course, match the type of animal that you choose with what intensity of its work level would be. Uh, we're out here. Of course, you have a Australian Shepherd dog, and we got an Australian cattle dog. So those types of animals need jobs. They need to have something. So if you are interested in that type of breed, that type of genetics, then you need to have you need to plan on doing something with them as opposed to just sitting on the couch and being a lap dog there. And then subsequently plan accordingly to that type of a feed. Um, Australian cattle dogs, take it from me, need a job. And we could certainly ask my wife at some of the things. When you don't give them a job, they'll find their own job, and but they can go all day long, and that's a great thing. Your Australian Shepherd cross will be able to go all day long as well too. So we want to plan for that. And I hope this isn't digressing too much, but a popular question that we get is if we are doing a lot with the dog, if we're working them, and should we stop and feed them? And which is a very good question. And it really the proper answer, I think, really goes back to the physiology of digestion and what the animal does. The digestion that the canine can goes fairly quick. A good 12 hours probably is a good time frame for digestion. But the way the anatomy is, the way things are, if you are working during that particular day and you stop and feed a large meal, it's probably not going to do you any good, because basically it's just going to set up camp there in the stomach and go through its normal process, while then you're going to go back after a little while and then exert another fairly large exercise or work period there. So that could almost be counterproductive. If it was more or less what I would call like maybe a snack, maybe a very small portion or something like that, probably okay. Probably not a bad thing. But to go on and feed to say, I want to get some more calories into this animal, it's probably not good. So you would probably want to load as much as you could before. But just take advantage of knowing the physiology of digestion with that particular animal to know about when a good time to feed, so you can match its work intensity. Then subsequently back to the sedentary dog that may take a walk around the block a couple of times. You're probably not as concerned about any of the extra real higher caloric intake for that. Other things to consider: grooming is an important thing.
Now, there's some
Long-haired
dogs
dogs.
you can't shave, right?
Well, think there are some that probably need to, but
Right.
from the characteristics of the breed, of what they are, you're probably not going to do that. So, a lot of considerations about that: long hair, wiry hair, curly hair, double coated versus a single coat, are going to be important things to think about.
So with Clyde, does he shed a lot?
Clyde will shed quite a bit. Australian cattle dogs, they do shed. As a matter of fact, there are times on our sun porch out there where my wife and I both may be sweeping up some of that hair, and kind of makes you think we could make our own dog, make another dog out of it.
Okay.
But they will shed, no question about it.
I know it's Cinch. He's got the wiry hair, so he's not quite the shedder, but he does shed little tiny hairs every once in a while. I don't know if you mentioned it, but how important are omega-3 fatty acids for dogs?
Well, all of the fatty acids like that, you have essentials and non-essentials. Threes and sixes. Those are more essentials, meaning that the animal cannot take it in, or the animal has to take it in and cannot manufacture itself. Omega-9 generally is not as critical or any of those things. But yes, they are very important from obviously from inflammation aspects. You get the help from that. So it is important because of the essential nature.
And in terms of maybe possible ailments that dogs may get, are there any general ailments that they may get? Say if you do go out working a dog and feed them, will they get sick? Will they get overheated? That kind of thing. Just tell us a few ailments that you might want to explain to our listeners.
Of course, on a day like today, the humidity really is not
right
as terrible as what we would see during a hot summer day and what have you. But still bad enough. So they're going to pant, no question about that. And other things, to help them, from an overheating perspective, is there going to be grass there for them to lay on? Is it all going to be concrete? Is there any other water? What about shade? Those type things for the animal to dissipate that heat buildup that they're going to have. Remember now, digestion is a heat process there. So the animal is obviously going to be generating heat, which is a good thing in cold weather, obviously. But in hot weather, that's not necessarily it's the greatest attribute or any of those things. So as you can see, old Clyde laying over there, got that panting going on, that tongue, and that's one of the natural occurrences. I have read research studies where they have done certain tests on respiration and panting, and a lot of them with the more flatter nosed animals probably are a little more susceptible to overheating and what have you than with the longer nosed, simply because of the size of the nasal passages and what have you for the heat dissipation there. So it's maybe one of the reasons why you see Uga from the University of Georgia. Always with ice and what have you, because of their lower, maybe a little bit lowered ability for that heat dissipation. Obviously, the longer haired animals, and one thing that a lot of us do, particularly on farms, we take our dogs with us, and sometimes they ride in the back, sometimes they ride up in the cab, and sometimes we run down to the co-op to pick up a few things, and the dog might be in the truck there, and even though the windows are down, you just don't want to do that very long, because they can sure enough get hot. And we always talk about that with humans, with babies. You never want to do that, and absolutely is the case, no question about it. But we need to think that way about our animals as well too. So sometimes you see that, and you don't really want them to be out there for a very long time because it makes it even more difficult to dissipate the heat. Cold stress, the animal does really good with it. And like I said, a good feed, as long as they're eating feed and their intakes are good, they'll generate a little heat. But at the same token, depending on their coat, they might need a little help to protect them and to keep them warm. One thing that I will also reiterate here, it is very important about hydration in the summer. It is very important about hydration in the winter as well too, because they certainly water is a very very important nutrient.
So in vaccinations, I know you're more on the nutrition side, but are there any vaccinations that you want to get when you have a puppy or a growing dog along the way? Are there any important ones that you want to mention?
Yes, of course. Well, first things first, I would encourage you to work with your veterinarian on that, and because there could be some local issues that the veterinarian may want to make sure to protect the animal from. But yeah, you want to keep them on schedule, and vaccination, yes, for protection of these diseases, but remember also, we're gonna get the vet involved, and we're gonna do the vaccinations, and we're gonna spend a little money doing that, and it's worth it. So at the same time, for the vaccination to work, you've got to have a very good plan of nutrition, because just because you go down there and vaccinate the animal and you feed them a bad feed, or you don't feed them correctly or anything, that vaccine's not going to work very well. So I would encourage to work with the veterinarian. Make sure you get them all done. Everybody always talks about rabies and the stemper and all those type of things. Yes, they're all important, particularly out here from a rabies perspective, when you've got every kind of varmint out here, and we do have them out here, no question about it. And so all of that is protection. So I would very much encourage work with your veterinarian and to sort out what the proper program would be. Now, mine, in addition to the vaccinations, we do every month we put a heartworm peel, and also for fleas and ticks. It is it is an oil, and you always talk about Australian cattle dogs, because I happen to have one, being very intelligent, and mine is no different, because you really gotta fool him to be able to get that in him. It takes more than a piece of bread,
Cinch loves them.
because he'll figure it out real quick.
Yeah.
So fortunately, my wife is really good at sorting out what the best treat is, and she's actually better at that than I am, and can hide it in that treat, and he'll take it no problem. With me, he'll look at it and swallow, wash it around and eat the treat and leave the peel. So it is important to work with your veterinary, about parasites and vaccinations and whatever.
That's another thing I was going to ask is deworming. What's the deworming schedule? Does it differ, since you have an outdoor dog or an indoor dog? Does it differ between the two, or do you just need to keep them on a good schedule?
Well, we do. We do it very regularly. My dog in particular is not what you would call a huge eater. And some dogs are just that way. The individuals are. Some are just that way. And his genetics, the way he is not of the typical healer type. And sometimes he almost he kind of borders on the thin side, because his workload and everything. And I think because of that I want to make sure nothing gets in the way. And so we very routinely keep him dewormed, just simply because of it.
And I sometimes see dogs eating grass. What does that do for them?
Well, that's a very good question, because the the dog in and of itself is not a complete carnivore. It is an omnivore, and meaning that they will take meat. Yes, meat proteins. Yes, very good, very high quality. But they also take plant-based material as well. Cats, for an example, are a true carnivore, whereas the dog can handle a little bit of the plant. So it's generally not what I would profess to you as a major sign of an ill health. Sometimes they like it, have a little bit of fiber, keeps the digestive system flowing a little bit. The dog does not have any ability to digest the beta carbohydrates or any of that stuff like a ruminant animal does, but having a little bit of fiber in the diet to keep the digestive system flowing is not generally a bad thing. If it is a constant thing, or if it's one where they go out and just basically eat the predominance of grass and then turn around and throw it up and then go back and just keep on and on, then okay, maybe that's a sign of something else going on, and you'll want to contact the veterinary. But it's not a bad thing. Most good dog feeds that you have will have yes will have animal protein, no question about it, but they'll also have some plant-based stuff. Having some berries and some other vegetable types of ingredients is actually a good thing.
Yeah, so I know Co-op has a lot to offer in terms of nutrition and feedstuffs that we might have in the warehouse and can be ordered. But I'm not going to make you go through all those because I know we have a bunch out there. But are our listeners able to reach out to you and maybe ask certain questions that they may have, and then maybe get a product reference to them?
Oh, absolutely. We take a lot of calls about it. A lot of folks call, and a lot of folks want to call and just really want to talk about their animals. And, hey, I did this and this happened, and what do you think? And that's great. We entertain that and really like listening to folks about it. Most of us, all of us, are dog people and are happy to talk about it.
I know Cinch was kind of picky on food when I first started out with him, so it does take a trial and error type situation, but I'm sure you'd be able to help somebody in this.
Absolutely. And just from me personally, with my animal, my dog, I have never been around a more finicky, picky dog. And I've learned just by accident or by trial and error with him on a few things. So yes, we're happy to help in any way.
Good deal. Well, thank you, Todd, for joining us and having us out on your beautiful farm. Is there any lasting comments that you would like to add?
Oh, thank y'all for coming. Appreciate it a bunch.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Pasture to Pets. Please join in next month for our July episode on the second Tuesday. Hope you had a paw-some time.